Hello and welcome to this episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. Today is Tuesday, August 1st. Hope everyone's having a good day so far and had a good rest of their day yesterday. It is in fact Tuesday, August 1st here today. We have officially hit August. July is now behind us. It is MLB trade deadline day today. 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Eastern is the MLB trade deadline. It is currently noon Eastern, so we're about 6 hours away from the MLB trade deadline. We will see what both the Mets and the Yankees do, what the Mets continue to do. They made another move yesterday, moving on from Mark Canha. The New York Yankees, well, we'll see if Brian Cashman decides to wake up and make some moves. And after watching last night, and after seeing that performance last night from the New York Yankees, they need to sell. I don't even want to hear about bringing in a fourth outfielder or an average left fielder or somebody to the back end of the rotation or a guy to add to this bullpen or an average catcher, whatever it is. This Yankee team needs to blow it up. They need to sell. They need to readjust in the offseason. And I mean, fire Cashman, fire Boone, move on from pieces today. Cashman and this front office need to wake up. They need to sell away pieces, and Hal Steinbrenner, at the top of this all, needs to wake up and realize that the Aaron Boone, Brian Cashman experiment is over. Brian Cashman's been in this organization forever. He needs to go. Aaron Boone needs to go. This Yankee team's a circus. It was on display last night. They need to sell. So we'll get to that to start up today's show. Some pieces that they potentially could move on from. We heard a report last night that potentially they can be moving on from a guy like a Bader and a Severino, two guys that are in a contract year, two guys that are going to be free agents at the end of the season. Do you move on from those guys and get something for them this year? I don't know how much you'll get for Severino. He's been so bad. You'll definitely get something for Bader. Do you move on from an IKF, Wandy Peralta? We'll get into that to open up today's show. I also want to get to the Mets in the second topic today as they move on from Mark Canha, their third trade. First one, obviously, David Robertson to the Marlins. Second one was Max Scherzer to the Rangers. That was obviously the big one. And I think a lot of people saw, Marte either being traded or a Mark Canha being traded. One of the outfielders, Mark Canha, it is. He gets moved to the Brewers, and the Mets continue to bring in more prospects. And we'll see what happens with Verlander. The Orioles, we've heard, are involved. We've heard that the Braves are involved, although I don't see any world where the New York Mets trade Verlander to the Braves inside the division. I just don't see that happening. If I was the Mets, no matter what the Braves are willing to give you, you do not make that trade. You just don't trade Verlander to the Braves. You don't do that when in your division. You're going to need a whole lot in return for Verlander if you're going to do it with the Braves. But either way, Dodgers are involved. Orioles, as I mentioned, potential reunion with the Astros. So 4 or 5 teams are calling about Justin Verlander before the 6 o'clock deadline today. So we'll see how it all ends up playing out. We'll get to that later on. We'll also get you ready for Yankees-Rays Game 2 tonight, which I fully expect another loss. And the Mets head to Kansas City for 3 against the Royals to open up a road trip. So we'll get to that all later on. But we got to start today on trade deadline day with the New York Yankees. And I got to start with what happened last night. I mean, first of all, I'll give you this stat. Okay, the Yankees lineup has struck out 30 times over the last 2 games. That is their most in a 2-game span in franchise history. So this lineup right now, this Yankee team right now, isn't just bad. They are historically bad. And we went into this 10-game stretch, one of the most important 10-game stretches, starting on Friday of last week against the Orioles in Baltimore at Camden Yards, and ending, obviously, this upcoming Sunday at home against the Astros. And we said this is a huge stretch. If the Yankees can find a way to put some wins together, make a little bit of a run, get back into the wild card race, really get back into the winning baseball, Judge is back, you start to feel good again. And this Yankee team hasn't given you a single glimmer of hope, a single feeling of, okay, this Yankee team's going to make a run. They lose again last night. They lost 2 or 3 in Baltimore. And out of this 10-game stretch, we are 4 games into this 10-game stretch, and the Yankees are 1-3. The Friday loss to the Orioles, they won on Saturday. They got embarrassed on Sunday Night Baseball 9-3. And last night, I mean, it was a circus in the Bronx. before we even get to what they need to do today and why they need to sell and why last night was another example to just punt on this season because this team stinks and it's not going anywhere. Last night, I mean, what are we doing? So you hear before the game that Domingo Germán's dealing with armpit pain. Whatever that means, whatever that pain was, it was clearly painful enough for him not to make the start. Johnny Brito gets called up. Ron Marinaccio gets optioned. We heard that he was going to visit the team doctor and he was going to miss the start. Okay, fine. I mean, not that that's fine. You don't like to see guys get hurt. You want to see Domingo Germán out there. But either way, it's like, okay, it's an injury. It is what it is. It happens. The part where it turns into a circus was, well, number one, Johnny Brito went out there and pitched like garbage. He allowed 4 home runs last night. 4 innings, 6 hits, 5 runs, 4 homers. Did not pitch well. Yankees lost 5-1. They didn't hit. Their pitching wasn't any good. Johnny Brito takes the loss, moves to 4-5 on season. He's obviously been pretty good in the games that he's gotten called up to spot start. Last night was not good. But the part that was embarrassing in the circus aspect of this all was when Domingo Germán goes out there in the 5th, and there he is, or the 4th, 5th inning, and there he is warming up in the bullpen. Domingo Germán's in the bullpen warming up to come into the game. So he got scratched from his start. Aaron Boone put it as he got cleared by the team doctor at around 5 o'clock-ish or whatever. He went out there at 6, threw a bullpen, felt fine, and they said, you know what, we can use you out of the bullpen today as a length guy, as a bulk guy, which just doesn't make any sense. If he got cleared at 5, if he got cleared and he was good to go, you should have went out there and started him. This could have been a completely different ball game instead of Johnny Brito allowing 4 runs or 4 home runs on 5 runs and 6 hits. Domingo Germán went out there through 5 innings, 4 strikeouts, 2 hits, 2 Ks, did his job, 72 pitches over the 5 innings. I mean, that was a complete circus last night at Yankee Stadium. Domingo Germán goes out there. You say he can't pitch. You say he's not healthy. All right, he gets scratched. And then all of a sudden, there you go. He's warming up in the bullpen. I mean, you can't make that up. And Aaron Boone goes into his press conference and tells us all their plan and everything that took place. I mean, last night was just another example. And that was, this team continues to find ways to just hit new lows. Last night was a new low. You scratch your pitcher from a start. And then you go on to say, oh, he felt good. He got cleared by doctors. Let's throw him out there. So the armpit pain must have just went away. He obviously wasn't feeling any pain. The Yankees or whatever, somebody misjudged it. And he goes out there and he pitches 5 innings. Like, well, what happened? What happened last night? What did we watch at Yankee Stadium last night? Or I should say, the circus, because that's what this team is. It's a circus. It's a dumpster fire. It's a complete implosion. It's a disaster. It's the Three Stooges doing what they've done for the last 6 years, burying this team further into the ground. And the Three Stooges, as I talked about yesterday, Hal Steinbrenner at the top, Brian Cashman, the general manager, and Aaron Boone, who's lost this locker room. I mean, you see these guys, there's no energy in the dugout. These guys are done. This team's shot. It's toast. This team stinks. Blow it up, restart, blow up the front office and the coaching staff in the offseason, and restart. Bring in somebody new. This organization needs a fresh start. There's so many pieces to this front office that have been within this organization for 20 plus years. That's not how you win. There's always been constant change in a lot of other organizations, and they've all won, and they've all done well. For the Yankees, you got to move on. You got to restart, and it starts today. I don't know if Cashman's going to wake up. Maybe he slept through his alarm. I don't know what the deal is with Cashman, but here's the bottom line. The Yankees are last place in the American League East. They are 55-51. They are 10 games out. When you look at the wild card, they are 3.5 back of the wild card, tied currently with the Mariners. The Angels jumped them last night. The Angels are 3 games up, and you expect the Angels to continue to play better because they went out, they traded for C.J. Cron and Randall Grichuk. They traded for Lucas Giolito. So they got 2 nice bats. They got a pitching. They added on the pitching side of things. Mike Trout will probably come back maybe in September. So you add him back to the lineup as well. The Angels are going to make a push for the wild card. They're going to be in front of the Yankees, I think, for a good chunk of the season, the good remainder of the season. The Angels are going to be ahead of the Yankees, and the Yankees will be looking behind the Angels. That's how I just see it. In order to make the wild card, the Yankees have got to jump the Angels, the Red Sox, and the Blue Jays. They've got to jump 3 teams to get into a wild card spot. That's not happening. And there's a good chance after tonight, the Mariners jump the Yankees, which would then cause the Yankees to be really 4th. They would have to jump Boston, Angels, Seattle, and Toronto. 4 teams to get into a wild card spot because currently the 3 wild card spots are the Rays, the Astros, and the Blue Jays. There's no sense in buying. There's no reason to buy. The season's over. What is adding an average left fielder? I don't even really know who's on the market at this point. I mean, Bellinger is off the market. Randall Grichuk already got moved. You know, there's some people that talked about Donovan from the Cardinals. Some people mentioned Dylan Carlson from the Cardinals. Neither of those guys are going to lift this team to World Series or a playoff. Like, Dylan Carlson's got an OPS under 700. His stats this year are very similar to Aaron Hicks' stats with the Yankees and the Orioles combined this season. Like, Dylan Carlson's not going to take this team to the next level. Going out and trading for Dylan Carlson's not going to do anything. You want to go out and trade for a bottom of the rotation, back end of the rotation type player, that's not going to do anything. It's not like you need serious changes. Trading for a guy that can be a solid, okay 4th, 5th starter is not going to put this team over the top. There's so many holes on this roster, it makes no sense to buy and give up pieces for guys just to get into a wild card spot, potentially just to lose again. Although, unfortunately, the Yankees' motto these days is get to the playoffs. That's what it is. They don't care about winning a World Series. That's not what they care about. The Yankees, the way they do business these days is to get to the postseason. It's sad. It's pathetic. It's embarrassing. But it's the way the Yankees are run and operated under Hal Steinbrenner and Brian Cashman. And throw Aaron Boone in there as well. The 3 Stooges. That's the way they run things. If they get into the postseason, they consider the season a success. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Yankees go out there and bring in some pieces today just to try and make a push for the final wild card spot, have to play road games in the 3-game wild card series just to say that they made the postseason, and then bring everybody back and do the same thing all over again next year. That's why you need to sell. You've got 4 guys that are on expiring contracts, 4 main guys that are on expiring contracts. And I've talked about this. I said this yesterday. Aaron Judge, Garrett Cole, and to an extent, Volpe. I'll put Volpe as a don't trade him because it's Volpe. He's shown some positives. It's been a rough rookie year, but you don't want to give up on the guy. Like, the only way you send Volpe in a deal is if it was for Soto. And the Yankees aren't trading for Soto at this point because it just is not happening. That's the only way. I wouldn't just trade Volpe right now and bring in more prospects. I wouldn't do it. So I would say the 3 players that I wouldn't move on from, obviously Judge and Cole, and Volpe as well. So other than that, I view this roster, everybody's on the table. You want to trade Rizzo and get him off the books for next year? I'd do it. I would. If that happens, you probably could potentially move. Again, the third base situation, you probably could call Peraza back up. You could always move LeMahieu over to first if you want to move LeMahieu to second if you trade Glaber. I wouldn't be against trading Glaber either. You might be able to get a younger starting pitcher, Edward Cabrera on Miami, the Marlins. He's a guy that's been brought up. You can bring him in. Not so much for this season, but he's a younger guy that could potentially develop, almost a retool. Bring him in, can be, maybe next year as he continues to develop, turn into a solid 3rd starter for this team. A solid piece, even trade piece down the road. You want to go ahead and trade Glaber and bring in a prospect or 2 and a current player? Go ahead and do it. You could get a decent amount for Glaber right now. You're not going to get a ton, but for a 260 hitter, a guy that can provide some pop, still relatively young, you can get a good amount for Glaber, especially because he's real. I mean, he's kind of coming on. He was on a hot streak in the month of July. So I could see Miami taking a chance on him. We heard that Miami was interested in him last year, interested in him again. Again, as the deadline get closer, teams get more desperate. They could give up a little bit more. I wouldn't be against trading Glaber. If I was general manager of the Yankees right now, I would do everything in my power to get rid of Stanton because he's shot. He's done. But he's got the whole no trade clause. It'd be very hard to trade him. Nor do I think anybody's going to take on that contract right now. I think Stanton, I would move Stanton in the offseason. When you have more time, teams are, more, it's impossible to, Stanton's not going anywhere. They're not going to trade Stanton. I'd be shocked if they trade Giancarlo Stanton. You would have heard about it by now. It takes a lot more than 6 hours to develop a Stanton deal. It's going to take a little bit. You maybe readdress that in the offseason. But some guys with expiring contracts that you can get something for. Harrison Bader. We heard a rumor yesterday. Look, I like Bader a lot, but again, you're not going anywhere this year. You want to move on from him, and again, the Yankees have to rebuild the farm too a little bit. The farm system is ugly right now. I mean, Peraza hasn't shown you a lot. Austin Wells is good, but he's an okay defender. He provides some pop, but he's not anything crazy. It's not like he's the next great cat. He's not the next Jorge Posada. I don't believe that. He's good. We'll see what he can do at the major league level, but he's not like popping off the charts and he's the talk of the minor leagues. Like, he's not that dominant. You have Florial, who's never really been given a very good chance, and even the chances he's gotten, he hasn't done much. So, again, you want to move on from a Bader? Maybe you want to move on from Bader, give him to a contending team. I could definitely see a team being interested in Harrison Bader. He's probably your top trade piece right now in terms of team wanting him because he's at the end of his deal, so it'd be only half a year. It's a low risk for the team because if it doesn't work out, you can just let him walk. And if the Yankees would like to bring Bader back next year, well, you can trade him this year. You can let him walk, almost what they did with Chapman, where they traded him. They knew they weren't going anywhere. They traded Chapman. They got Glaber back for it. They also got one other piece. I forget who it was. And then they re-signed him in the offseason because it was his walk year. You can do that now with Bader too. You want to re-sign him in the offseason, go ahead and do it. If you know for a fact because of the injuries and maybe you're going to go with center field somewhere else, maybe, Dominguez coming up the pipeline, a guy like him, maybe you want to sign just a rental next year, or however you address center field, and you're not going to sign Bader, trade him. Get something for him. IKF's another guy. Free agent at the end of the year. Wandy Peralta, free agent at the end of the year. Luis Severino, free agent. Severino, I think, has got to be off this roster within the coming days. Whether it's a trade or a DFA, he can't continue to make starts every 5 days for the Yankees. You want to Phantom IL him and give him 2 weeks off and see if you can figure it out? Go ahead. Fine, do it. But Sevy can't make his next start for the Yankees. I don't know quite when that is. He made this start, Sunday? So it's probably sometime in the Astros. You cannot roll Luis Severino out there against Houston. You can't do it. Phantom IL him, DFA, trade him. Somehow, he's got to be taken off this roster for at least a couple of weeks and try to adjust, try to fix. Because you can't sit here. If the Yankees do decide to go the route of, contending or buying, let's say they bring in some pieces today and the market's kind of bare now because everybody's gone. Like either guys have gotten traded or like either pieces have already been traded or like in Bellinger's case, they were taken off the market. If they do decide to bring in like a Dylan Carlson, though, and say that they're going all for it, you cannot tell me with a straight face you're contending for a wild card spot and still tell me that you trust Severino out there every 5 days. You just can't do that. I wouldn't be shocked if somebody wants to take a chance on Severino again. He's in a contract here. A team took a chance on Joey Gallo. The Dodgers went out and traded for Joey Gallo and gave up Clayton Beeter, who's actually been very, very good for the Yankees. So, Joey Gallo, a team took him. He was horrible with the Yankees. He was just about as bad as a hitter as Sevy as a pitcher. Dodgers took a chance. I wouldn't be surprised if a team takes a chance on Sevy, at least just to try and fix him, see if they can get something for him, or get something out of him. Again, he's a free agent at the end of the year. It doesn't really hurt. Wandy Peralta, as I mentioned, a team would take him. Like, he's a reliever. He's got a 2.29 ERA. You want to move on from him. Look, I wouldn't mind if you move on from the four of these guys. I like Wandy a lot, but again, they're free agents at the end of the year. You can always bring them back. IKF utility guy, go ahead. Team would take him. Bring in some prospects. Try and bring in some guys. Just try and move on from some of these pieces. Just restart, sell, move on. This roster needs to be replenished. That's really what this roster needs to just, and again, my thought process is you sell today, call up some of the young guys, call Peraza back up, call up Florial. You know, you want to roll with, fine, Jake Bauers, go ahead, do it. I really don't care. You know, I think at some point you got to think about benching Rizzo. At some point you've got to think about it. I mean, you've got to. Like, at some point you've got to think about giving the guy a day off just for his own, like, just for him mentally. His confidence right now is at an all-time low. The guy can't hit a baseball. And the guy's been hitting like one. The guy's as bad as Joey Gallo was. I mean, he really is. The last 2 months, he's putting up Joey Gallo numbers. Joey Gallo, through his roughest 40-game stretch as a Yankee, was just about the equivalent to what Anthony Rizzo's doing. Like, he can't hit. And don't give me the nonsense, he had 4 hits a couple weeks, against the Royals. It's the Kansas City Royals. They're the second worst team in baseball, only ahead of the Oakland A's, who the Yankees are actually the second, worst hitting team, only ahead of the Oakland A's. But yeah, I would potentially move on from those guys. Look, if somebody comes, put everybody on the market. Put them all out there. Move on from pieces. Like, the Mets are doing it. The Mets realize they're not going anywhere. They moved on from Scherzer. They moved on from David Robertson. They moved on from Mark Canha. They realize, we're not going anywhere. Move on, get something for them. And potentially, again, David Robertson, maybe the Mets bring him back in the offseason. You can always do that. Same thing here with the Yankees. You want to trade Harrison Bader, get some prospects for him, help the farm a little bit, give some young guys an opportunity up at the big league level, and then bring them back in the offseason. That's a win. Go ahead and do it. Anything you can get for Severino is a plus. But the Yankees have got to recognize they're not going anywhere this year. As I've mentioned plenty of times on this show, I ruled the Yankees season over, probably earlier than many, but I said this team wasn't going anywhere. Really, I mentioned it from the start of the season. I didn't think this team would go anywhere, but that's just me. I looked at it as a glass half empty approach because I knew that this team made very minimal signings in the offseason, where they signed Rodon, and other than that, they brought up Volpe, and the lineup's basically the same exact lineup as it was last year, and that's the same lineup that got swept by the Astros in the ALCS. So why believe that this team's going to be any different, especially now where they're playing this badly? Yankees got to make a decision, though, because they can't. I would rather the Yankees buy today or sell, obviously. I want them to sell, but I would rather them buy than. What I don't want is for them to go through today and not do a single thing. I want them to at least do something today. The last thing I want is to hold on to this roster, keep this same roster, roll with it the rest of the season, and just watch this dumpster fire every night. I can't take it mentally. Like, at least if you move on from some of these pieces and you call up the young guys, at least you can watch some of these young pieces and see what they're all about. And it's kind of a fresh start for them. But, oh my gosh, if you keep the same lineup and don't make a move, which I fully expect to happen because it's the Yankees. I wouldn't throw it past them. And we have to watch this same lineup for the rest of the season. I can't take it. I just can't take it. It starts today. The restart starts today. Move on from pieces. Blow it up in the offseason in terms of the front office and the coaching staff. They won't do it middle of the year, nor do I really care. Just do it in the offseason. And restart. And recognize, you know what? The Brian Cashman era, Brian Cashman, we understand you've been in this organization for 20-plus years. You haven't delivered a championship since 2009. We've got to move on. And throw a sense of urgency in his organization. Hire a GM that knows how to develop the farm, knows how to invest into the farm system, understands that you can't build lineups off of power or bust, because that's what this Yankee team is built off of, and then hire a head coach that's got some accountability. Hire a head coach that runs a tight ship. A guy that's accountable, holds players accountable, because Aaron Boone does not do that. Aaron Boone continuing to state that there's good at-bats outside of the strikeouts is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Move on, restart. Because you cannot continue to just waste these prime years of Aaron Judge and Garrett Cole. And if you hang on the pieces today and you do the same exact thing next season, where you roll out Boone and Cashman there next year and it's the same dumpster fire of a lineup, nothing's going to change. It's going to be the same result. And everybody's off the board. Like Jameer Candelario went to the Cubs. Your third base options are gone. You're not bringing in Arenado. Give me a break. That's not happening. Sell. Sell, sell, sell. That's what I want the Yankees to do today, because that's the only way you get this organization at least trending upwards, because right now it's just like this. And if you don't do anything today, it's just going to continue to go like this. And until you make some moves, until you wake up, nothing's going to change. So that's what I got to say. We move on to the New York Mets. And look, I actually have to give a compliment to the New York Mets. And I understand Mets fans, you might not want to hear this. You might not care, because you're probably extremely frustrated, just like us Yankee fans are, that the way the season has went. I mean, you went into this year and there was realistic. I mean, I guess there was a lot of people out there that thought there might have been a chance for a Subway Series World Series, where, both teams had high expectations. Mets, I think, maybe a little bit more than the Yankees, because they made more moves in the offseason and it collapsed in both these teams' faces. But the one thing I can give credit to the Mets is it's been a really rough year. We know that. It has not gone nearly the way they expected. I mean, they were out of the playoffs. They're not going anywhere. They're selling at the deadline instead of buying, which if you would have told me at the beginning of the season that would have happened, I would have not believed you. But at least this front office, unlike the Yankees, is recognizing we're not going anywhere this year. We're not going to win a World Series this year. We're not going to be a playoff team this season. It makes no sense to, number one, hold on to players on the roster, and number two, potentially buy for a final wild card spot. Because it's just not going to work. When you look at the other teams in this National League, it's just not going to work. This roster is not good enough. This roster is not performing well enough. We can move on from guys that are going to be free agents at the end of the year. We can move on from some contracts. We can bring in some prospects. Steve Cohen continues to talk about building up the farm. You can go ahead and do that and restart, kind of replenish or retool. Sell this year. Don't go through another rebuild, but restart and address everything else in the offseason. You want to go ahead and make a coaching change, whatever, that's stuff you worry about in the offseason. But at least the Mets recognize that. And I got to give them credit. Because unlike the Yankees, where they still haven't recognized that they're not going anywhere this year, at least the Mets recognize that. And they're setting themselves up better for the future, making these moves. And yesterday they moved on from Mark Canha. And when you look at this Mets team, they are 50-55, and they're 6 games back in the National League wildcard race. I mean, they're done. And I know the NL wildcard race is crazy, and it's wild right now with how tight it is. But the Mets aren't, they weren't going anywhere. They're making moves, and they're bringing in some prospects. So yesterday, the Mets made a move to trade Mark Canha to the Brewers. They get Justin Jarvis, right-handed pitcher, in return. He comes into the Mets as a 13th ranked prospect. He is 23 years old. His estimated time of arrival is 2024. And obviously the Brewers get Mark Canha. And Mark Canha is a guy that has been really disappointing for the Mets this year. A guy that's flexible in terms of where he can play in the field, position-wise, can do a little bit of everything, a little bit of a utility guy, mainly obviously in the outfield. But, he was such a good signing for the Mets last year. And this season, just like the rest of this lineup, Mark Canha has struggled big time this year. From really the start to now. He just hasn't been the player he was last year. You get him, you get rid of him, you bring in, a prospect for him. I kind of knew, again, as I've talked about a little bit on this show before, and as I mentioned, too, to open up today's show, you kind of knew one of these moves was coming. Whether it was a Mark Canha or a Starling Marte, you knew one of these outfielders was going to get moved because it's been a really underwhelming position this year. The outfield, even Brandon Nimmo, I mean, he's been all right, but not quite living up to that contract. Mark Canha is very disappointing. After playing 140 games last year, hitting .266, having a .367 on base, a .403 slugging, and a .770 OPS, you've seen a major drop-off in the numbers from last year to this season. And don't forget, last year he had a career high in hits with 123, and he also had a career high in doubles in 24. And I love this move for the Mets when they brought him in because it was a part of the Oakland A's fire sale. He was a free agent. The Mets brought him in the offseason of 2022. Obviously, last year's offseason was a very good piece for them last year. Wasn't much of a factor in the 10 at-bats that he had in the playoffs, but was a guy that was one of the better pieces on that A's team, and you paired him up with the Nimmo and Marte, and that outfield last year was phenomenal, and he was a big reason why they won 101 games. But just like a lot of other pieces, like Max Scherzer, like Jeff McNeil, David Robertson now gone, who was good, but Marte, you've seen a drop-off. Alonso hasn't had the best year ever. Just like those guys not putting together a very good season, and the team as a whole struggling, Mark Canha, after a career year last year, especially when you look at the hits and you look at the doubles for the Mets in 140 games played, struggled tremendously in a big way this year and had a big regression from year one with the Mets to year two. And you really knew it was just a matter of time when he was going to get dealt. And the Mets bring in a pitching prospect. What happens with that pitching prospect? Well, that's going to take a little bit to see. His estimated time of arrivals next season. But the fact that you bring in a pitching prospect, you bring in another piece to this farm system, potentially these guys could also be trade bait down the road, is a positive for this Mets organization. And again, when you look at the numbers from 2022 to 2023, he had a .245 batting average this year, .343 on base, .381 slugging, .725 OPS. His batting average dropped 21 points. His on-base dropped 24 points. His slugging dropped 22 points. And the biggest drop-off of them all was the OPS, which dropped from .770 to .725, which is a 45-point drop-off from last year, 2022, and this season in 89 games, and his second year with the Mets in 2023. Had a feeling this trade was coming. And you even look at his career numbers. .248 batting average. This year he hit .245. .348 on base. This year was .343. .422 slugging. This year was all the way in the .381. .770 career OPS. This year, .725. So even when you line him up with the career numbers for Mark Canha, he had a really disappointing year. And it's unfortunate because this is a guy, again, can do a little bit of everything. And to have those pieces on your roster producing the way he produced last year was a big positive. He was one of the better pieces for this team. He was one of the more underrated pieces for the Mets. Just didn't work out in year two. And the Mets make their third move. But again, realizing, hey, we're not going anywhere. Sell off the pieces that haven't played well enough. Sell off the pieces that have interest around the league. And build up with more prospects. And through the three trades for the Mets, they have moved on from David Robertson, Max Scherzer, and Mark Canha. And they've gotten Marco Vargas, Ronald Hernandez, Luis Angel Acuna, and Justin Jarvis. I don't love the David Robertson trade. I don't. But I think the last two trades of Max Scherzer and Mark Canha, the Mets get Luis Angel Acuna, who is raking at Double-A, can play outfield and infield. The Mets' number 2 prospect now. And they get Justin Jarvis, who slots in as the Mets' 13th prospect. And again, it's not like this guy is some elite, but having a pitching prospect, gathering more prospects is really what you're going to get in these deals. It's more of about moving on from that player that really struggled, and that's really what this deal was about. Was moving on from Mark Canha, who really struggled this season, from what he did last year, where he hit .266, had an OPS just a tick below 800 at .770. And when you look at Justin Jarvis's numbers, he's pitched in 17 games this season. Well, he was in AAA with the Brewers. We'll see how it all ends up playing out with the Mets. But He pitched 17 games this year. He has a 6-6 record, 4.33 ERA, innings pitched, 87 and a third innings pitched, 102 strikeouts, and a whip of 1.42. So not necessarily numbers that fly off the charts. But obviously, he made 14 starts in AA. He's only made 3 in AAA. The AAA numbers are ugly so far through his first 3 starts where he's had an ERA of 10. The AA numbers, however, 3.33, 6-4 record. So all in all, when you put those together, he's got a 4.33 ERA in the year. Not great considering the first 3 starts of AAA have been ugly for him, but you'll see if he can adjust. You'll see if however it ends up playing out. And again, the Mets might not be done. We'll see what they do with Justin Verlander. If I had to guess, I don't foresee the Mets moving on from Verlander this year. I just don't. Again, I think it's going to take a whole lot. It's going to take a whole lot for them to move on from Verlander, in my opinion, in terms of what they're going to want to get back. I don't know if a team would be willing to. But again, you've heard the Orioles, you've heard the Dodgers, you've heard even the Braves as some teams, and the Astros have some teams that are interested. Astros seem likely in terms of a reunion because I could definitely see Verlander welcoming a trade there because Verlander, similar to Scherzer's, got to accept the trade, got to want the trade. I could see Verlander wanting a trade to Houston. I don't think Atlanta's not going to happen. The Mets just won't do it. Or it makes sense for the Orioles because the Orioles need pitching. Their bullpen's great. Their lineup's very good. It's their starting rotation that's the biggest issue. It's not great. And I know they'll get John Means back, but John Means is good, but I don't know if he's a guy that can carry rotation through the postseason. And I know Verlander's postseason numbers weren't very good, but still, adding a guy that has been a lot better recently and clearly has a lot more left in the tank than a Max Scherzer, let's say, would be very beneficial to the Orioles. I think that would be a very perfect move for the Baltimore Orioles to bring in a guy like a Verlander, another veteran to the rotation, a piece that's already won championships and has been around for a long time on an Orioles team that is very young and would be their first playoff experience. So not even from a factor of what Verlander can provide the rest of the season, but also just as a leadership role going into the postseason, because the Orioles are going to be one of the youngest postseason teams. They don't have much experience. They haven't made the postseason since the Buck Showalter days. It's been a while. So Adley Rutschman, guys like that, that's their first real experience. Verlander being a guy that's had a lot of postseason experience, especially recently, winning a World Series last year with the Houston Astros, would also be beneficial to that locker room. So I could definitely see the Orioles being a fit. You're not going to get Jackson Holiday in return for Verlander. That's not what you're not going to do that. But you can probably get, the Orioles do have a lot of good prospects. You might be able to steal one of their top-end prospects. Again, not Jackson Holiday, but somebody, maybe their third, fourth prospect that can potentially play a role in the future for the Mets because the Orioles farm system still is loaded, even with the success at the Major League club. So it probably might be the biggest win-win for both sides if the Orioles and the Mets can get a deal with Verlander, but we'll see. And I know Mets fans don't want to move on from Verlander, and I don't blame them because he's been good this season. A couple good starts. He'll have an ERA below 3, an ERA back into the 2s, which is very good. He's had a very under-the-radar last, kind of 2 months where he's really turned into the Verlander we saw more of last season. And I can understand not wanting to get rid of two of your top pitch. Like Scherzer, you got rid of. Verlander can still be an ace of rotation. He's proven that. So I don't blame either Mets fans wanting to get rid of Verlander and completely having a fire sale, getting rid of your 2 pitchers, getting rid of Robertson, getting rid of Canha. I think the moves they made right now are good. Maybe they make one other move. I know Brooks Raley's been out there, although it seems like the Mets, with the whole option, would like to bring him back next season. Do they move on from him now and get something for him? Again, I could see, teams are always looking at bullpen help. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But anyway, trade deadline today. I don't think the Yankees are going to do a single thing. It's already about almost 1 o'clock, and there hasn't really been much rumblings at all about anything with the Yankees. It's a whole lot of just rumors and a whole lot of what I want to say, just rumors and speculation. That's really, really what it's been. So it'll be interesting to see what all happens. It's the Yankees are just a train wreck. Again, we also have heard more reports that the Astros, I think the Astros is probably I think the Astros are probably the most likely because he's been there. He knows the front office. Jim Crane would like that. I'm sure the Astros would be very willing to give up pieces to bring back Verlander. He's knows Houston, obviously. That was his other home. So I don't know. It'll be interesting whatever happens with Verlander. You're always a little bit surprised. You're always a little bit surprised whenever moves go down, though. Like, even if you expect them, it's always a little surprising because, like, once you see one of your players just get traded, it's always a little bit surprising, but even if it's expected. But anyway, that'll do it. So, that's the pod for today. Stay tuned. A lot more content coming your way. We'll see whatever the Yankees do at the deadline. We'll see if they make any moves or if they stand pat. They got 5 hours. We'll see if Cashman wakes up and makes any moves. Who knows? Maybe they are working the phones, and maybe it's an eye-opener for this Yankee front office that nobody wants any of their garbage because that's basically what this Yankee roster is. And if that's the case, I think that should be an eye-opener with the way this roster is built. But we'll see. Anyway, I hope Hal Steinbrenner understands, though, now why fans are upset. But either way, that'll do it. See you all back here tomorrow. As always, hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.